Thank you, Christian, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We are all stewards of infinity and beyond. And so for my talk tonight, I want to start with a question that I know is on a lot of our minds. What comes next? In the past 4 years alone, we've seen fires, floods, hurricanes, pandemic, spreading hatred, acts of violence. We've seen the raid on the US Capitol. We've seen the invasion of Ukraine. What comes next? The truth is, it's a terrifying time to leave the bubble of college behind because no one knows what comes next. But I believe it feels like they're standing on a cliff, looking at this raging sea, right, being told you have to jump out. We look at these waves, we see the danger, we see the uncertainty, we see the chaos, and we know there's no clear path forward. And we know that our safety is not even guaranteed. But as intimidating as all this is, I believe that beneath this turbulence, there is a current that's pushing everything along. And so if we can understand what this force is, and we understand where we are in the grand timeline of humanity, we can chart a course through this storm and build the lives of our dreams together. So let's put this into perspective. Where are we? Most of us in this room are members of Generation Z. And for the rest of this talk, I'm going to use that term to refer to everyone born after the year 1997. Because even though that doesn't show on this graph, we share two critical factors which I think make a common perspective. The first one is something that's intuitive to all of us, and that's the fact that our futures are interdependent. So when scientists say that sea levels will rise by at least a foot by mid-century, and that weather events will get more extreme and severe, it is our lives and the lives of our children who will be affected and displaced. And our nations have not been able to recognize this and act meaningfully. Now, the other factor is something that's invisible and familiar to all of us, and that's our relationship with technology. So the rest of this talk, that's what I'm going to explore with all of you. So Generation Z, what is our story? It is not written yet. That's up to us. But let's start by putting ourselves into context of the bigger picture. The internet was born in 1983. And 14 years later, the first members of our generation were born. A mere 10 years later, the first iPhone was sold, and we can see since then that access has been skyrocketing. Now, as of January 2022, there are almost 8 billion people alive in our world. 5.3 billion have mobile phones, and nearly 5 billion are internet users. These numbers have risen almost entirely in our lifetime, so it's hard to appreciate how significant this is. So let's take a step back again. The internet has existed for only a millionth of our existence as a species. If you remember Benji's diagram of the calendar of space-time in a year form, the last second before midnight was 1492. We have had the internet and iPhones our entire lives. Think about how small that is in this scale. That is less than a blink of an eye. At the same time, Gen Z, we are also the largest generation in history. We make up over 30% of the world. That's over 2 billion people. And because of this relationship with technology, we are the first true digital natives in history. And so what we're dealing with here is something that's never really happened. And to understand what's going on, we have to ask ourselves, what is infinity? Now, we know probably that infinity is what goes on forever. It is boundless and limitless. But it's also what's inside your pocket right now. And so I'm going to ask you all to do something for me. If you have your phone with you, please take it out and hold it up in your right hand. And look around and see how many people are doing the same thing. That's almost everyone. So my argument here is that this is not just a phone. This is a gateway to infinity. Or in the words of David Deutsch, it is a gateway to the beginning of an infinity of knowledge. So in other words, our basis for good explanations is expanding infinitely. And good explanations are what make scientific progress possible. Right now, as we are here today, this is expanding infinitely and exponentially in all domains, and we are all connected to it. To put into context the significance of what this means, I want to share a quote from Ray Kurzweil. He's the author of The Singularity is Near, the director of engineering at Google, and an absolutely incredible man. And he said that we won't experience 100 years of technological advance in this century. We will witness on the order of 20,000 years of progress, or about 1,000 times greater than what was achieved in the last century. Those numbers are insane. But if we add up those factors from before, the largest generation in history, the first digital generation, first digital natives, and witnessing 1,000 times greater progress than what was achieved in the last century, we will not only be passive bystanders of that, we will be the ones leading this progress. So if we ask who will run the world in 2050, it's not a mystery. Now, most answers to this question would say maybe it'll be the Americans, or maybe now it'll be the Chinese or some other nation, but it's not that. There's only one answer to this question that's a certainty, and that is us. We will be running the world in 2050 because by virtue of our birth alone, we have tremendous power. And with that power comes immense responsibility. Because as we all know, our world is not all right. We've inherited these problems. We haven't created them. But it's still our mess to deal with because our children will inherit the world that we pass down to them. So what will we do? It's a tough question, but I think we can start from certain easy steps. First is, what norms will we set? Now, most of the problems we face today come from a worldview that fixates on this corner of a grid right here. We've been told that we should focus on our immediate self-interested needs because we're rational individuals. And we see all the damage that this has wrought. As a generation, we can change the lens. We can shift our view and our culture to encounter this whole grid, to focus on the now us, but also the future us. We can make a culture that looks out for the future generations as well as ourselves. Even more importantly, we can recognize that infinite games start small. From this place of love and curiosity, as the smallest domino, if we bring this out in each day of our lives and all of our interactions, we can use this to build out into bigger relationships of friends, into communities of trust and belonging that believe they can make the world around them better. And this one piece can lead to a far bigger shift in the world than you could ever imagine. And if you were to take anything away from this talk, please let it be this. Don't wait. Don't wait for someone to tell you what to do. Don't wait to finish college. Don't wait to get that job. Start today. You can follow your curiosity relentlessly. Come together with other people and learn and build and solve in public because we are connected to this explosion of infinity, and it's happening today. It's happening around us, and we are a part of it. So I want to close off with one final note, which is that while this is happening, it's very easy to feel insignificant, and you may too. I know I certainly do, because we are only 1/8 billionth of humanity, and that can be crushing. We will have times that are low, and they will be hard to get through. That's why we need each other. But I want you to remember this. A fraction of infinity is still infinite. And when we come together as a generation from this place of love and compassion and curiosity, we will form a sum that is far greater than our separate parts. And so you cannot be insignificant. It is impossible. So as a generation, what we have is infinite power. And in every day of our lives, we will be writing the history of future us. That starts today. What history do you want to see? Thank you.